I mean, we're already on to the next league year, but I feel like free agency is like the end of the actual like previous season. And I mean, there's been some fireworks. I don't know, like, is free agency dead? What's your take on that? Is free agency dead, or has like the Myles Turner move and the Dame waived and all that been enough for you to be like, all right, it's not dead yet?
It's a down year. I'll call it a down year. I'm not gonna proclaim it dead. I'm not gonna pull a Richard Jefferson time of death Wednesday, July 2nd, 5:57 p.m. I don't know how you feel about that being a signature call or not. We're not doing that on free agency yet, but I do think it's a down year combined with front offices and like people are like navigating the new rules and the new normal, and they're setting themselves up for other things. But that being said, I've said whoa at my phone like a couple times already. So it's not like there's been some intrigue and surprise, and we're going to get into that. Well, I guess we should start from what's most recent to what has happened in the most recent news. And we had talked about this like 20 minutes ago. Appreciate you, Deandre Ayton, for waiting for us to start the pod before making your decision. I think the writing was on the wall. We knew that when he was bought out by the Trailblazers, which, by the way, made me say whoa at my phone a little bit, but makes sense with Jan Hansen and Donovan Clingan on that roster, gets bought out. He is now a Los Angeles Laker. Now he's with the guy who went third in his draft, the number 1 and number 3 pick from that 2018 class together. And now it's another number 1 pick that gets to be LeBron James' teammate, potentially. But I guess we could start with that. Does this move the needle? Lakers have a starting center now. He averaged 14 and 10 last year, although there's a little more to those numbers.
Wait, actually, before we get into that, can I hit you with a little bit of trivia? I want to see if you can pull this one up. The other day, I was looking this up, didn't end up doing anything with it, but just looking it up. Top 3 picks from the same draft class that have teamed up since 2000. Do you think there's only been, besides Ayton and Luka, there's only been 3 others? There's one that I was like, I cannot believe these 2 were teammates, and then there's 2 others that I think you'll get. Okay,
my question is, were they drafted since 2000 or just in the same draft class and teamed up since 2000?
Drafted since 2000.
Damn. Okay. Well, there goes what I was going to say. Oh, man. Top 3 picks from. It was just funny. Shout out to our guy, Bill Troche, just messaged me, another number 1 overall teammate for LeBron, by the way, because we talked about this for a while. The list grows. Man, I'm stumped. I'm absolutely stumped. Is there? Give me a team.
On the spot with this one. So
give me a team.
Well, one of them is teammates with Luka and Deandre Ayton right now.
One of them teammates with Deandre Ayton right now. Is a top 3 pick on the team right now?
No. Like he was teammates with another top 3 pick in his draft class.
Oh, so who's 2 in that class? Dang. Why am I? This is crazy right now.
All right, I got you. I'm not going to.
Yeah, this is bad. Hey, listen, I'm usually better at this, by the way.
That's why I felt pretty confident about putting you on the spot, but that's all right. It was LeBron and Melo.
Yeah,
it was
of course.
Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell. And then the other one that I didn't see coming, they overlapped in Minnesota. The other one that I didn't see coming, they overlapped in Brooklyn, was D'Angelo Russell and Jahlil Okafor had played games together in Brooklyn.
D'Angelo Russell and Jahlil Okafor.
That one, I had to dive deep into Basketball Reference game logs to be like, is this actually accurate? But
yeah, so my one I was going for was when Christian Laettner, Shaq, and Alonzo Mourning won a championship together in Miami. They were 1, 2, and 3 in 1993. But that's all I got for you. But I got to redeem myself a little bit.
All good. But back to the subject at hand. I mean, obviously a perfect fit, and almost feels like, how did this fall into the Lakers' lap? You know what I mean? Like, all right, you're struggling to find a center. It didn't feel like anything was lining up for you. There were reports of, they have something in the works. Like, there was a lot of vague wording from McMenamin going into free agency. And then, the Deandre Ayton shoe drops. And all of a sudden it's like, well, that feels like he's destined to be a Laker. Yep. And here we are a couple days later, and he is a Laker. And it's an interesting fit, right? Like, this is a player who obviously has all the talent in the world. He just chooses whether or not he feels like using it. Like, he's, a super talented player, but he's also extremely lazy. And there are reports of him skipping practices, missing training sessions, missing team planes, buses, all of that. That's the type of stuff that you would hope that being teammates with LeBron James will kind of whip you into shape a little bit. JJ Redick kind of feels like he's, someone that's not going to put up with that type of nonsense either. So, you get that lob threat for Luka. You get somebody who's capable of being more than just a rim running lob threat. He can defend when he wants to. This is all kind of just what is DeAndre Ayton going to make of this situation, right? And we haven't seen the terms of the deal yet. Shams had
It's 2
reported
years,
that's a
all we know,
2-year
right?
deal.
Yeah.
2-year deal with a player option in year 2. So he'll have a player option for next summer. Basically a prove it deal, like how good can you be this year and can you earn yourself more money next year? That's the way it seems at least. So I'm curious to see what version of Deandre Ayton the Lakers get. But at the same time, like given how bleak the center market was looking after Myles Turner had signed with the Bucks and, with Al Horford probably being the next best option out there, like this is about as good of a gift as the Lakers could have ever, asked for.
Yeah, that's kind of prove it is a great. I mean, obviously we know we call these prove it deals, but that's where I'm at right now. I don't want to be overly pessimistic, but because there's just so much unknown and so many. Well, if DeAndre Ayton is ready, and if he follows LeBron James' example, and if he's ready to, not make JJ Redick upset, and the LA pressure isn't too much. There's so many ifs that I got to see it. Basically, it's how I feel right now about that with him. We know that, I think back to the 2021 version of him during the playoffs, that finals run with Phoenix. He was incredible. He was awesome throughout the playoffs. And even with his defense that he had, I remember our guy, Scott Rafferty, wrote about it. The defense he played on Giannis to start that series, obviously we know how that series ended. But DeAndre Ayton, I think that, he's played with Chris Paul, obviously, but he's never played with anybody like Luka before. Not for nothing. I remember during DeAndre Ayton's rookie year when Phoenix came to Charlotte, we asked him a question about Luka, and I thought that he was going to kind of take offense to it because he'll always be known as a guy who went number 1 in the class, that Luka went number 3. But that being said, as you know, it's a free agency. We both look down on our phones. That's crazy.
Nothing
Frank
major.
Vogel joining us. Nothing major. But they have a relationship, and I know he's like, man, Luka owed me some money or something like. These guys are tight. They've been close because of that draft process. So I think that'll help him as well. So I love a focused DeAndre Ayton and applied DeAndre Ayton for that Lakers team, especially given like it's a starting caliber center, size, finishes around the rim, and he's still young. But it's just like, man, is that the version the Lakers going to get? And because there's so many ifs that we've learned. And listen, like I said, I'm a fan of DeAndre Ayton at his peak when he's applying himself and all of that. But it's just too many questions, too many what ifs for me to be confident that they'll get that from day one.
Yeah, I mean, no surprise you and I are on the same page there. Like, I want to be a DeAndre Ayton believer. Like you said, that playoff run with the Suns, like he played really good defense on Jokic. Like he was, active on both ends of the floor, running the rim, catching lobs. Like, like when he's at his best, like this is a guy who literally could average 20 and 10 if he wanted to. But the crazy part is that like he doesn't always want to, and he still averages like 15 and 10 because he's just that talented. Like, to have that size, that athleticism, solid mobility, he's got solid touch. Like he's the type of player that should thrive next to Luka and LeBron and Austin Reeves. Like that's a pretty damn solid starting lineup with those three, Rui Hachimura and Ayton. Like you're starting to see the vision a little bit. I mean, obviously they got lucky that Ayton became available and LA ends up being the perfect situation needing a center. But, is he going to squander this opportunity and kind of just go through the motions, or is he going to make the most of this and really kind of kick himself into gear? Like that's going to answer any question of like, how good does this make the Lakers, or where, the Lakers are now a top blank team in the West. Like even getting Ayton, it's hard to answer those questions because you don't know what version of Ayton you're getting. As of right now, like I'm not 100% sold that this makes them any more or less of a title contender than they already were with, Luka and LeBron and Reeves and the core that they have. Again, if Ayton's at his best, like then yes, it bumps them up probably another tier. But are they still are they at the level that like Oklahoma City is, or like the way that I feel like Houston is, or Denver is after the off seasons that those two teams have had? I would not put them in that same class.
Yeah. Ultimately, and I guess the one thing before we move on to a different team and different topics and different subjects, coming into free agency, LeBron opts in to the year. There's this kind of passive aggressive statement from Rich Paul saying LeBron wants to play for a championship contender. And your point, this doesn't necessarily move the needle. It just addresses a major need and makes them honestly more of a competent team, because we saw when Rudy Abdul-Jabbar went crazy against them to close out the series. You know what I mean? So that shouldn't happen against DeAndre Ayton this time around. But I guess my thought is, and neither of us are mind readers, neither of us know, the tactics, the specific tactics that Clutch is using to put pressure on Lakers. Do you think that this maybe calms that down a little bit? They'll be like, okay, look, this is a step in the right direction for what this team needs. Or they also got my guy, Jake LaRavia, out there too, who I think is an underrated signing. But do you think that they're going to be a little bit more satisfied, or there's still more to be done?
Well, it's funny. Like LeBron is the most calculated dude of all time. And like earlier this morning, he posted that picture of him golfing with the coming home hat on, and like I mean, listen, LeBron's been in the league long enough, and we followed his career, and you and I are both massive LeBron guys. Like we follow him very closely, and like there is nothing that guy does that is not calculated. It's, everything is on purpose. There's no coincidences. Like him posting that on Instagram today is almost like, all right, hey, Deandre Ayton clears waivers at 5:00. You better get this done.
Make that call.
Or at least like his subtle kind of backhanded way of doing that. I think that it does calm things down a little bit, just because like obviously that was a massive area. That was their biggest area of need. And it had been an underwhelming free agency to this point. I think because they, once DeAndre Ayton became available, they probably shifted every single plan that they had to make him the priority. And I do want to bounce it back to you, because I did want to let you, you're as familiar with Jake LaRavia as anybody else. So, give the listeners a little bit of an idea of what the Lakers got in him. But I do think that it kind of gets the clutch mafia off of the Lakers' back a little bit, because they were able to get
take a deep breath,
take a deep breath, because they were able to secure a certified starter, someone who feels like if he's playing at his peak, can get them back into that contender status. But I do want to hear your thoughts on the LaRavia signing and what you think he can bring to the Lakers.
Yeah, obviously the Wake Forest bias is there. He spent one season at Wake after he played at Indiana State, so they call him Larry LaRavia every now and then. But I think that it's funny, the sentiment about him has been so many people like, oh man, I'm looking at a Jake LaRavia film. This guy can actually really help us. He's young still. I think he's 23 years old, going into his fourth year, and he really hasn't had that much opportunity. He was he's a first round pick, 2022. He was in the Grizzlies rotation to start because they had so many injuries that year. Then he kind of fell out of it, and then the Grizzlies didn't exercise his player option, and he enters free agency a little bit earlier. They traded him to Sacramento last year, and he's one of these guys where like he produces in small sample size or in small roles, and it's almost like he needed to have a bigger role. Well, the departure of Dorian Finney-Smith opens up a bigger potential role for him to be a 3-and-D guy. He guards well on the perimeter. Like I said, good size, 6'8", what have you. So I think that he's going to be a very important addition for them. As long as he can hit the jumper, he can step into that bigger role. I think he'll be confident. Apparently, the Lakers let it be known that he was a priority for them in free agency, and it makes sense. We talk about what do you need for a successful Luka Doncic team, because LeBron will be 41 this year. We don't know how much longer he has, but this is a Luka Doncic team, and it's also an audition to get Luka Doncic to sign that extension or stay with the team. So get 3-and-D guys, get lob threats, make sure this team is complete and that they have a bigger picture. And I think that's the big thing about the Ayton deal also. Like, it's not breaking the bank. They aren't mortgaging anything of their future to make it happen. I know they're angling to try and have a big free agency in 2 years, but also you need to try and win now. And they're able to do both of those things, both of those moves. Now, we'll get back to the personnel move after we have a break, but I do want to talk about another player move. I mentioned the other big center on the market. Thought it was a foregone conclusion that Myles Turner was going to stay in Indiana. Longest tenured Pacer, been there 10 years, had the passionate speech when they made it to the NBA Finals. And then that's when I said, whoa, when I saw he signed a 4-year deal with the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks are in do whatever it takes to keep Giannis mode, and including whatever it takes. That means waiving and stretching the remaining $113 million owed to Damian Lillard over the next 5 years. Because I said, whoa, again, the Damian Lillard is a free agent. Which part of that was most surprising to you? The fact that Myles Turner left Indiana to go to the Bucks, or that the Bucks cut Dame Lillard to make it happen?
Well, that was one of the things where like you are at a severe disadvantage being on the West Coast, because the night before I was on the Night's Watch for work. I was up until like midnight Pacific, so 3 a.m. Eastern, making sure that, we were casting a wide net and weren't missing any breaking news. So I was sleeping in yesterday morning, and I woke up to about 80. Yeah, exactly. I woke up to about 80 Slack messages, like 15 to 20 Twitter notifications. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So I started scrolling through, and I'm like, okay, we got the Shea max extension. That makes sense. I'm like, oh yeah, we got Myles Turner signing. That makes sense. Oh, we got Damian Lillard waived. Like I had just seen the Myles Turner news and was like, oh yeah, okay, sign with the Pacers, whatever. Then I saw Dame waived, and I'm like, wait, what's going on here? So I click into it, and then I'm like, oh, Myles Turner signed with the Bucks. Like, what the, you know what I mean? Like, it was a real, like, kind of, no one saw that coming. And like from the report, like the fallout reporting of it too, it sounds like nobody around the NBA had even heard that was a, potential, route for Myles Turner. And I think the thing that's interesting is like, that just goes to show how much like the Tyrese Halliburton Achilles injury has really changed the landscape of things for the Pacers so quickly. Because I don't know if I mean, maybe you disagree. I feel like you probably wouldn't, but like if Tyrese Halliburton doesn't tear his Achilles and the Pacers are, still looking at his prime to potentially like repeat as champs of the East and get back to the NBA Finals next year,
they're running it back.
I just don't think there's any way that Myles Turner is not re-signing in Indiana. But now all of a sudden it's like Halliburton's hurt. Okay, well the Bucks lost Brook Lopez. They now need a starting center, and reports say that the Bucks offered $4 million more per year. You kind of got lowballed by the Pacers a little bit at 20 mil versus 24 for the Bucks. So it's now all of a sudden like, all right, they need a center. I can fill that role. I'm a similar player to like what Brook Lopez does, except just younger. And maybe get an even bigger offensive role with Damian Lillard. Rehabbing the Achilles all year, so he signs with the Bucks, and now all of a sudden Dame's not even on the team. It's like, that was kind of a head-spinning moment, especially considering how big of rivals Indiana and Milwaukee have been over the last couple of years. So that was pretty shocking to me. The Dame news, obviously pretty shocking as well. Like, never would have thought that would have been the avenue that they felt was best to kind of like, find some wiggle room on that roster to keep Giannis happy. But now it's extremely interesting because Dame is going to be making basically supermax money over the next 5 years. But he can basically just take the veteran minimum and choose any destination that he really feels like is the best fit for him to try and win a championship. And whether he chooses that destination this offseason or just rehabs for an entire year and then figures it out when he looks at the landscape of the league next year, when he's back and healthy and ready to play again, that remains to be seen. But I mean, I even at this age, I feel like Damian Lillard is still a massive chip on the free agency market.
Yeah, Dan will be 35 this summer. He'll be 36 probably the next time he steps on the court. So I guess that's what we're hearing rumblings that, unsurprisingly, most every team has reached out. They're interested. But the three that stand out are obviously the Lakers, Warriors, Celtics. I don't know what you think about that, the potential of him maybe rehabbing alongside Jason Tatum, and going through the exact same thing, basically happened a couple weeks apart. Obviously, he's a West Coast guy. He wants to be closer to his family. I think there's a timeline in which he finishes it up back in Portland once. I think that's the next contract or two contracts down the line. I think, we talk about Dame. I think one, I know for a fact he's going to end on his own terms. He's not going to let an injury end things for him. But I also think that, they've smoothed over the way things ended with him in Portland. And I think that I could see him, when it's all said and done, and the Blazers, I think, are going to be an exciting team with what they've got going on right now. And I think there will be a sneaky team this season. But down the line, that could happen. But do you have a feel, just your opinion, on his decision between, signing to rehab with a team this year and being under contract? He's making $22.6 million regardless. So he can sign with a team and add to that, or he can just go back home and be with his family. I know that's been a big thing that he's talked about, being away from his family and missing that. So all options are kind of on the table.
Yeah, the thing about going back home and like playing for the Warriors, it's just so bizarre because like him and Steph have always been, I think that they like each other a lot, but like I think there's like definitely a pretty massive rivalry there, and they obviously like had the Western Conference Finals matchup in 2019, and like they've had some battles when he was in Portland, and like I've always like jokingly said that like if it wasn't for Steph Curry, like Damian Lillard would literally be the best shot creating shooter I've ever seen in my entire life. So it's like to see those two playing alongside each other would be pretty insane to see, but it would also feel kind of weird because Dame is such like a prideful, competitive dude that like it would almost like feel weird to see him alongside Steph instead of competing against Steph. Obviously it's late in his career, so like I'm going to respect any decision he makes. On the Boston front, like that's a team that could use some scoring. They could use a punch at the point guard position. They could obviously use a 3-point shooter of that caliber with the style of play that they, like to play. And it would be cool to see him and JT rehabbing alongside each other this year. The fit would be interesting, but loving Dame the way that I do, and like he's always been one of my favorite players, it would kind of feel like from an excitement standpoint, like almost like when I found out the Celtics got Kyrie Irving and I was like, oh my God, this is like the best thing ever. Like, but I don't know. Fit wise, like, yes, they would be able to use him, but I feel like it would really kind of like suppress what Dame would want to do at that point in his career. Even though he is getting older, I still think that he could be a 20-point per game scorer, even coming off of an Achilles injury. Miami is the one that really feels like that is like the best opportunity for him to still like maximize who he hopes to be coming off of an Achilles injury. Like they could really talk about a team that could use a scoring punch in the half court and playing alongside Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo. Like it just feels like that'd be a great fit. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that's a destination that he ends up in, especially because there was so much smoke about him going to Miami before he ended up, ultimately in Milwaukee where no one saw it coming. So if I were to rank them, I would say it would be Miami, Boston, and then Golden State for the three teams that we've seen. But I also don't think it's that crazy to think that, like, all right, he's 35. He's coming off an Achilles injury. He's probably not playing this season, even though there were some rumblings that he might be able to return after the All-Star break. It would probably make more sense for him to just wait the year out, get his body right, and then see, like, all right, what team needs a score for his point guard, going into free agency next season. I actually think that would probably be the best option for him. But if not that, I think going to Miami would be, a pretty solid option for the next step in his career.
Yeah, I can see Miami being one. It's be interesting. I think that's a good point to where, like, hey, like, let me see what the Heat are going to do, because they're not there right now. But I also, on the flip side, just thinking about, not knowing, and obviously I hope for the best for him coming out of this, because the league is more fun when Dame Lillard is Dame Lillard, and we saw it this past year, especially some of the performances that he had, even like in the NBA Cup. But I'm curious if there's and this is why agents make the money and consultants make the money that they make. But, is there some security that comes from, hey, you lock in a 2-year deal with this team because we don't know what it's going to look like when you come back from this. He's not a guy who, he was never, it's been years since he played above the rim, right? And so it's not like, it's going to be more about that first step and the shiftiness when he comes back from this. But he'll be 36 years old probably when he plays again. So I am curious to see, how that impacts. And also, like, there's no like limit. Like, there's nothing that says he has to sign with somebody by training camp. Like, he could decide to sign with somebody, by Christmas or by the deadline or whatever it is. It's on his time. And I think that's, people were talking about feeling sorry for him. And obviously I feel sorry for him, the fact that he's injured and that it happened the way it did. But as far as him collecting the money he's going to collect and also having the opportunity to choose his next destination, that's probably the best thing you could ask for in a situation or circumstances this poor. So definitely excited to see how that plays out. And of course, we will keep you locked in with everything we know. Who knows? We might get some news about Dame when we finish recording, which would make me upset, but I have no idea. There'll be more stuff to talk about happening around the league. We'll talk through some of all right, we waited to the second half to talk about this because it's not as exciting as the player movement, but the Knicks have a head coach, we think. What the reported right now is that they're expected to hire Mike Brown. An offer has been made. We've talked about the process throughout the process and them getting denied, all this stuff. But we don't have to talk too long about it. But my question for you is, based on what you saw Mike Brown do in Sacramento, revolutionized their offense with De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis in 2022, 23. Do you like that as a change of pace from what we saw the past few years from Tom Thibodeau?
I just don't think it moves the needle. Like, he's a solid head coach. Don't get me wrong. Like, coach of the year a couple years ago. Like, yep. He's been in the league forever. He's had teams that have made the finals. He's had teams that have made the conference finals. He, I think, has a winning record overall as a head coach. But it's just
it's like 600 win percent, I think.
Yeah, which is extremely impressive for especially as long as he's been in the league. He's got rings as assistant coaches for different teams. It's just like, it doesn't move the needle to me. I don't know if you feel the same or different. Maybe it's a way that they can try and, revolutionize the offense so it's not just so like Jalen Brunson centric. And maybe it's a way that he can find a way to get Cat back in the mix and get the ball in his hands a little bit more. Like, I'm curious to see how it makes I almost said Lakers. Curious to see how it makes the Knicks look different. But like, as of right now, like, I saw that, I know that it had been reported that he was the favorite to land the job, but like, all along, I'm kind of like, all right, Mike Brown, kind of a boring signing. Let's move on to the next thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's not really, I can't really disagree there. I think that it's like a similar message, but different, coming from a different voice. The big thing people are going to ask, and I wrote about this, is difference between Tom Thibodeau. This is actually pretty wild. All 5 Knicks starters last year averaged at least 35 minutes per game. 3 of the players were in the top 10 total minutes played. I looked back at the year that he revolutionized things in Sacramento. Their leading minute guy was Sabonis, and he averaged actually less than 35 minutes a game. So expect more guys to get breaks. But I also think that, to be fair to Tibbs, the Knicks have added Yabu and Jordan Clarkson, Gershon Yabusele, and Jordan Clarkson in free agency. So when you talk about the starting 5 that they have, you talk about Deuce McBride and Mitchell Robinson, they have 9 guys that you should be able to trust, and they probably couldn't say that last year. I guess campaign also fits in that, but Tibbs didn't trust those guys, and I think they had a big hand in why people play so many heavy minutes. So just changing things up in the margins, at the same time, like, the East is wide open. It's just as wide open as it would have been had they kept Tibbs. So, I want to give Mike Brown credit for if and when he does something, maybe he can have a Kenny Atkinson-like impact the way that Kenny Atkinson did things in Cleveland last year. But at the same time, he's also starting from a higher point. This team made the conference finals last year. So honestly, not necessarily my expectation, but I think the expectation is Eastern Conference Finals at the very least for him. So that's kind of a tough spot to find yourself in. But I like what you mentioned. He's coached LeBron James. He's coached the LA Lakers. So those are about the only thing that there's more pressure than that is coaching the Knicks. But he's done number 2 and number 3. So he should be prepared for it.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I actually like. I already feel bad for Mike Brown. And like, this is something that we can circle back on in a year from now. But it's like, that's a hot seat that's not going to turn off because you are joining a team that, like you said, their floor should be the Eastern Conference Finals again, especially with the way that things are looking in the East next year with all the injuries and whatnot. So it's like, if he comes up short of that, and actually let me add into that as well, that it was so late in like the offseason cycle that like the Knicks had already missed out on a lot of the top names. And we saw all the reports of, hey, can we contact your coach? Can we contact your coach? And they were getting denied by everybody. So it's not like Mike Brown was the first option for the Knicks and they were super excited about it. Like, he's kind of just who was left. So like the combination of that, along with the pressure that he's going to face to meet expectations, it just feels like it's an unfair hot seat that is waiting to eject him out of that spot. Like, if they were to come up short and lose in the first round next year, I'm not kidding, Mike Brown will be fired. I will say that like outright right now. If they were to lose in the first round next year, 100%. Mike Brown will be fired because he wasn't their first option in the first place. He's just who was left over, and they're going to see, all right, what other head coaches are out there? So I almost feel bad for him ahead of time. Yeah, and you know what? Hey, at that time too, like, hats off to him because he'll still be getting paid for the Knicks. He'll still get his money, but it's just like with the expectations that he's facing, I can't really see this being an extremely long leash for a team that feels like they're in a win now mode.
Yeah, 100%. I think the other thing that's kind of tough, and I've never been a coach, but I feel like I think that there are going to be a lot of holdovers from Tibbs' staff. So I think, and we talked about him earlier, Frank Vogel is now a member of Jason Kidd's staff. But from my understanding, when he got the job in LA, he didn't really have much say over the way his staff was assembled, and he really wasn't in control. He won a championship, but that's a tough spot for a coach to be in. I can just imagine, again, never being a coach, but saying, hey, I get this new job in one of the most iconic franchises in all of sports, and I don't really have that much control over how things go from the beginning. So one, it's not really your thumbprint's not really on it, or your fingerprints aren't on it the way you want to. And the second thing is they're keeping these guys around. So I look to my left and right. To your point, we start the season off 19-19. I might not make it to All-Star break. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that is also something that's very real, right? So, I again, like to put a bow on it, I think that Mike Brown is a very good coach. I think that he got a little bit of a bad rap because people in the past, like, oh, coaching LeBron is easy. And he didn't have a real opportunity to show that he is a good coach independent of that. He did that in Sacramento. And that's the other thing that's crazy about him. He's been on an NBA sideline or been working with NBA franchises since 1992. He's 55 years old. So he's not that old to say that he's been in the league almost 4 decades. But after he had that Lakers job, he didn't coach he wasn't a head coach for a decade. He was on the sideline in Golden State, was a defensive coordinator there, actually, which is also crazy. Then he became an offensive guy back in Sacramento. So I hope the best for him. We'll see. But again, like you said, the floor and the expectation at the very least is getting back to the Eastern Conference Finals. And that's a lot of pressure to deal with. That being said, we talked a little bit about what the Knicks did. We've talked about the wide open East. And I guess the way to wrap this up, because there's been so much happening, free agency obviously isn't dead because of everything that's happened this offseason. You mentioned it. Who are our winners so far? We don't have to get into losers. We can keep it positive. I have 2 in mind. So if you say one of the ones that I say, I'll just go with the other one. But I'll kick it to you first. How are you feeling? A temperature check on 72 hours into it. Who's doing well?
There are a couple teams that come to mind for sure. And I want to disclaimer this with obviously teams like Dallas have done a lot in terms of, just drafting Cooper Flagg and signing D'Angelo Russell. Right. I feel like they've made some solid moves. And then there's Orlando who, I love the Tyus Jones signing. I think that is a fantastic pickup for them. But the Desmond Bane trade had happened a couple weeks prior. So it feels like they're kind of off. So I'm not grouping those types of teams. Yeah, old news. Exactly. So I'm kind of not including them in this group, but 2 teams that have really impressed me. The Atlanta Hawks have really impressed me. I love the way that they have gone for it They have a new GM running the show there, and I feel like with all the injuries that are going on in the Eastern Conference, and just the way that all the injuries are shaping up in the Eastern Conference, it's wide open. And I feel like they're kind of like, all right, hey, this is an opportunity to really go for it. And, I think Porzingis, if he can get back to even half of what he was that first season in Boston, that's a really good pickup. Nikhil Alexander-Walker obviously got paid. I really like that pickup for them. They snagged Luke Kennard as well, just a veteran who can shoot. He's reliable. I like what they're doing a lot. Another team that has really stood out to me, I feel like the Denver Nuggets, after a couple of years of, they win the championship and then it's like, what's really going on? You didn't bring anybody back. You didn't really do anything to make the team better. You kind of just stood pat. I feel like they finally are starting to make some moves that are getting them back to where they need to be to maximize Nikola Jokic's championship window. I know that the Michael Porter Jr. for Cam Johnson trade was kind of getting clowned because it's kind of like they're two very similar players, but I just feel like, Cam Johnson is a little bit of a smarter player who is going to be playing off of Jokic a lot better. A little bit might be generous.
You're nice, man.
I know. I mean, like, honestly, some of the funniest moments watching Nikola Jokic play over the last couple of years is how pissed he would get at Michael Porter Jr. when he would do stupid things like just be in the wrong spot, make the wrong cut, take a bad shot. Like, that's the type of stuff that you're going to eliminate getting Cam Johnson instead of MPJ. They brought Bruce Brown back. I thought that was Brucey B. I feel like they kind of regret letting him go in the first place, but I feel like that type of Swiss Army knife jack of all trades really helped with the lack of guard depth that they have. And then trading for Jonas Valanciunas. Like, I mean, when has Jokic really had like a sound backup big that is reliable? I mean, I know DeAndre Jordan in the back end of his career was really trying to give it everything that he had, but I feel like JV bringing in Valanciunas, that's also a massive, massive move to shore up their front court. So I love what Denver's been doing as well.
Absolutely, and Tim Hardaway Jr., the other guy,
and THA too.
This is a team like that. You're looking at. I think they were 28th in the league in 3-pointers made last year. So bringing Cam Johnson. Got Tim Hardaway Jr. now. Bruce Brown is back. These are guys who, Bruce Brown won't be mistaken as being in the same level of shooter as those other two guys, but they're not going to have that issue anymore. And this is a team who we watched it. We were there. They were one win away. Obviously, they got smoked in Game 7, but they took the champs to the brink, right? And they were right there. And they also had that position where they were in a similar position in the Pacers where they could have gone up 3-1 in that series also. So the fact that they've improved their roster so much, and I could give you a handshake through the computer, I would. Those are the two teams that I was going to say, Atlanta and Denver. Clear winners so far, just what they're doing. I was watching, I think, at SportsCenter on the background. Hawks before free agency were 25-1 to win the East. That those odds went to 9-1 to win the Eastern Conference. And again, that speaks to this being wide open. This is the best roster that Trae Young has had around him. And I think I saw a stat. I'd have to confirm it, but I think that Trae Young is the only person on that roster that's under 6'5". So when you talk about building a roster around Trae Young, that is how you build a roster around an undersized guard like that. And obviously, we love Trae Young, and he's going to set these guys up. I think it'll be interesting to see guys like if Kobe Buffkin can hit, right? This is a guy we haven't really seen. I think that they like him there. Zachary Reese-Shea, #1 pick last year. Guys that are already in-house. Jalen Johnson got injured last year. A lot of it rides on his health, but that's a really deep roster. They go 2 or 3 guys deep in every position. And to throw another one out there, because they've done more since the Kevin Durant trade, the Houston Rockets, man, I don't know where they're getting the money from. I guess I need to get more familiar with their cap, but bringing in Dorian Finney-Smith and also bringing in Clint Capella, that also kind of surprised me. I didn't expect him to go back to Houston. I like what they're doing. They got 3 centers now. They could go Şengün, they could go Steven Adams, they could go Clint Capella. They got a lot of different looks, and you think about what the Thunder did with their size, copycat league. Rockets can contend with that. So between those teams, the West is going to be ridiculously competitive. But to think about what you mentioned the Magic already on earlier pods, but what the Hawks have done to really set themselves apart. And this being, I take this team way more seriously than the 14, 15, 15, 16 Hawks team. So I'm excited to see what they make of it.
Yeah, same here. And I was frantically trying to pull up the Rockets depth chart as you brought up the Rockets because I wanted to make sure that we mentioned them as well. I think that they've done a great job not only retaining guys they knew they wanted in-house, like Aaron Holiday, Jayshawn Tate, Jeff Green, like guys that they want, that they know are, good energy on the bench. They're going to step into their role and stay ready when their numbers call. But also, obviously it's a big deal that they brought in Dorian Finney-Smith. He's someone that is a super versatile 3-and-D wing that, can kind of take some pressure off of Jabari Smith Jr. and Kevin Durant. I'm curious to see if they can get any sort of a leap from Reed Shepherd this year. It seems like they've kind of carved out some minutes for him in the backcourt. And, he was really good in the G League last year. He had some bright spots at the end of the year when, it was kind of like the garbage time of the season and they were giving him some more minutes. But like, I'm curious to see if he can step into a bigger role next year. That kind of leaves me wondering
Thanks for checking out NBA Soundsystem Canada on YouTube. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe below and find us wherever you get your podcasts. And on Instagram, we have weekly episodes and bonus content throughout the week.